This is a painful part of Africa's history where men, women, and children were sold, chained, and shipped away like animals.
So for a bottle of dry gin, 10 slaves was in exchange for a bottle.
This is Badagri, and I came here to trace the stories, to walk the same path where millions were captured, sold, and taken across the ocean to an unknown destination just for slavery.
Out of 40 slaves that are kept there, maybe it's only 20 of them or 15 of them that will survive.
This is not just history in books, it happened right here, and today I want to take you through that experience, exactly where it happened. This is the story of the transatlantic slave trade. Badagry is a coastal town in Lagos that holds some of the darkest and oldest stories in Nigerian slave history. But how exactly did slave trade start in Nigeria? The story of the slave trade in Nigeria didn't start with the European traders, it started right here amongst our own people. Back in the 15th century, powerful kings and local chiefs would capture people during wars and raids, and these captives were used as domestic servants or laborers. At that time, owning a slave was a symbol of wealth and power, but then something changed. Slaves started being treated like goods as people could take them to the market and sell them in exchange for cowries or material items. And just like buying food or clothes in the market, anyone with money could buy a slave like a commodity. The slave trade was already going on before the European traders came, and when they arrived on the shores of West Africa, they tried to trade with the locals, but they were not interested in the local currency that was spent as at that time, and that was when they adopted the exchange of slaves for material items. They discovered that they needed laborers to work on their farm and plantation back in Europe, so they began to trade items like cannon guns, dry gins, and mirrors, and in return they received the number of slaves that was agreed upon with the slave traders. And just like that, a local practice became an international business, which was the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. And some of the original chains, shackles, and relics used during the slave trade era can still be found inside the Mobee Relics Museum right here in Badagry.
We have two types of slaves. We have the domestic slave, the ones working in the house of the master. We have the field slave, the ones working on the farm and on the plantation. So the trade was finally abolished here in Badagry with the help of the man Nigerian called Chief Mobee. He died on the 16th of October 1893. During his old age, trade finally stopped. But his father was involved in the trade. His father was one of the middlemen between the white and the black. He buys slaves from his fellow black, he sells to the white.
So apparently the slaves are made to hang this chain on their neck. I mean, this thing is so heavy, it's so heavy. I'm sure this is going to be more than 5 kg on their neck for 18 hours a day. Just imagine how crazy that was.
Slaves were often allowed to talk while they are working and also to eat. You see, their masters are afraid that while the slaves are busy working and they are communicating with each other, they are local talent. They can plan on how to attack their master. And for the slave not to eat any farm products, they fix this. Pull out their lips, perforate the up and the nose without iron.
Jesus.
Like this.
Hey God.
Like that. For them not to communicate or eat. So this is called the grinding iron, and this is what they use in piercing the lips. They put it in fire. When it is very red hot, they use it to pierce the up and the lining. They pick this and they padlock their lips. Also during that period, slaves don't bear their name. They bear the name of their master or any name the white man just to give them. That's why you see some Yoruba, some people they have all these foreign surnames like Smith, Williams, Pedro. So then for their masters to be able to identify their slaves, they will put it in fire. When this is now very red hot, they'll use this to write the name of the master.
They also use
body,
this
to brand.
Yes.
Cowries was only recognized as money among we black people. The whites that was coming down to buy slaves, they do not see cowries as money, as a means of exchange. So that led to the introduction of trade by barter. So they now bring in items in exchange of slave. Gun, sugar, cotton, mirror, matches, iron. So for a bottle of dry gin, 10 slaves was in exchange for a bottle of dry gin.
The Mobee Relics Museum is not just a building but a place filled with painful memories and stories from the past, and I could still feel the pains and torments that Africans had to go through during the slave trade era. To further understand the history of the slave trade, we were taken to the Barracoon of 40 slaves, which is where dozens of slaves were kept while waiting for the ships that would take them across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe. So we just left the Mobee royal family house and we are currently heading to the Barracoon of slaves. So according to what they said the Barracoon, that's where like the slave cell, the cell where they keep all the slaves. The word Barracoon means a prison or holding cell, and this is where captured slaves were locked up for months inside a tiny room with no windows, toilet, and barely enough air to breathe. The room is so small and barely enough for one person to live in, but imagine 40 people kept inside this place for weeks, all confused, afraid, and unsure of what would happen next. So apparently 40 slaves are kept in this small room. I mean, this place is not even up to where one person is supposed to stay, but 40 people are kept here. Like, and out of those 40 people, there are only 15 people or 20 people that survive. They slept on bare grounds, chained together by their hands and feet. They ate in chains, urinated and defecated on the same spot in chains. There was no freedom in sight, just waiting to be taken, and many never even made it out of this room alive.
These are the European products that they brought for Chiseke about to extinct slaves. We call this one ceramic. So each of the bowl was given to Chiseke about to extinct for 10 slaves, each of them. And that's the money we spent for the powder. This is the bottle of gin for 10 slaves. This is the beer mug that was given to him by the German. And this is the brass dish that was given to him by the Brazilian.
Inside the compound, you can still find some materials that the slave traders got in exchange for selling the slaves, and other artifacts and relics that preserves the story of the slave trade era. We left the Barracoon of 40 slaves and headed to the next site, which is the Badagry Slave Museum, where we also get to learn more about the slave trade. So we just got to the Badagry Slave Museum, and this is where we get to learn more stories about the transatlantic slave trade. The Badagry Slave Museum is a structure erected during the British colonial era, and it was built in 1863 as the office of the former district officer, but today it stands as a powerful reminder of Nigerian slave history.
So this is the cannon gun. So they use this gun in exchange for 100 slaves.
Okay.
So for them to get 100 slaves, for them to get this gun, they must provide 100 slaves. A replica of the ship. So the ship has upper deck and the lower deck. Upper deck for the masters, lower deck for the slaves. And this is the loading pattern of the slaves in the lower deck of the ship.
So apparently the slaves are made to drink water from this, I don't know what to call it, and it has a very sharp edge. So if you try to force yourself to drink water, you're just going to injure yourself.
So these are domestic slaves. So you have two categories of slaves, domestic slaves and mission slaves. So these are domestic slaves. They are slaves that work in the house for their masters.
This is like a picture of what happens when a slave is trying to escape. There are some dogs that are trained specially, right, to go after people that are trying to run, right, and they are trained to bite them, like to injure them. What makes this place even more powerful is that it also highlights the people who played major roles in the trade and the brave ones who stood up against it and brought an end to the slave trade. Badagry is believed to have been an exit point for over 500,000 slaves shipped across the Atlantic Ocean between 1500 and 1800. And we've traced the origin of slavery from the Mobee Relics Museum, the Barracoon of 40 slaves, and now the Badagry Slave Museum. But the journey isn't over yet. In the next video, I'm going to be taking you on a journey to the point of no return where captured slaves took their last step on the African soil. So do well to subscribe to the channel, like this video and share it so others can learn, and I'll see you in the next one.